You guys may be seated. You may be seated. Those of you who are guests with us today, I want to say this. We're followers of Jesus who daily love God and the people in our community and world. That's what we say about ourselves, that we're followers of His. And, years ago, the leadership of this church, we sat down, we thought, what kind of church is this going to be? What kind of church do we want to be? And we thought, well, we want to be a church that literally has people come from our church to go around the world. To be a church that literally has people who, after they realize God's call on their life, that God may have something very special for them to do with their life, that God may have something very intentional to do around the world. And so we began to pray. We just said, God, would you just kind of stir the hearts of a few people in our church to maybe answer the call that you have on their life, just to be somebody who would say yes. Not only to loving people in this community, but to love people around the world. And so it's my privilege, really, just to introduce to you, this is Laura Rogers. And Laura, this morning, comes to us from where you guys are sitting. She literally answered our prayer. God stirred in the heart of Laura a very important message, a very important opportunity, a very important platform for her for the rest of her life. And she heard God's call and she said, I'm going to do what God says, because it's always best to do what God says, right? And so I'm going to let Laura talk a little bit, because Laura has decided, she's already been out on the field. She's here visiting with us again. She comes back to her home. Her mom and dad still go to our church, and they've been around here for a long while. And so maybe, Laura, if you could just open us up this question, like what's your history with Valley View? How long have you been around here?
So I was dedicated in this church, and my mom wants everyone to know that she brought me in here when I was 2 weeks old to dedicate me. And so about 30 years, a little over 30 years now. And the last time I was on this stage, I was doing Nick at Night with the little glow-in-the-dark gloves, if any of you remember that. So it's been a while.
Been a while, but I'm so glad that you're here with us today. And I want to ask this question. How did God lead you to the point where you decided to be a missionary in another country? How did God get you to that point? What was going on?
So a lot of things were going on, but came to like a more focused point when I went with the church on a mission trip to Guatemala. And the missionary there just point blank asked me when we were having a conversation one night, why haven't you ever thought about doing missions? And I didn't have a good answer. I had a horrible mission trip experience when I was in high school, and I was like, well, I don't think God's ever going to call me to do that. And so I never thought about it again, but this kind of brought it to the forefront of my mind. So I came home, I came to the office here, and I just said, I'm looking at missions. I don't want to make a commitment, but what's around here that I could look at? And they told me to go to Pioneer Bible Translators, which is a local mission organization. And so I filled out a form online, got a call back like 2 hours later, and got invited to go up there and meet with some people and just hear what they do. And one of the questions they asked me was, what is in your hand? Like God asks Moses. And I said, I don't know what's in my hand, I just want to help. I didn't have any special training, but they were like, okay, we can use that. And I said, just one thing, I don't want to go to Africa. It's one stipulation. But through the course of a few months of just visiting with people, I heard from several different people in different situations that West Africa needed help. They needed people who could come and do support work. And so after hearing that 3 or 4 times, I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to West Africa. And so I just kind of went into it. I threw myself into it, and God honored that, and He opened doors, and He gave me opportunities.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to be able to hear the voice of God, and then the important thing is to be obedient, right? Some of you have heard it, and maybe you're not called to go around the world. Maybe you're just called to be obedient where you are, but that call of God is so important in your life. And so, but maybe there is somebody in this audience, because we continue to pray that as leadership. We're praying that people from our church would hear God and then be obedient to go somewhere in this world. And so don't be surprised if God doesn't call one of you. But if someone does call them, I know all these people are really nervous and don't want to move to Africa, but maybe, yeah, but it'd be all right if they did. But I think too, like what would you tell somebody who's feeling like God maybe calling them to be a foreign missionary? What would you say to them?
So my first and foremost strongest suggestion would be to pray. Going to God first, seeking his counsel on this is probably the most important way to deal with if this is something you're feeling led to do. In James, it says that God, if you lack wisdom, God will give it to you if you ask for it. So I think if you go to God first and you seek him earnestly in prayer, he will honor that. Secondly, I would advise you to find godly men or women that you trust and tell them what's going on. Tell them what you're thinking. Have them pray for you. Because having more people tell you, yeah, I've been praying about this, and yeah, I think that that's a good idea, can kind of just reinforce what you may already be feeling. And third, I would say go to missions organizations. Ask questions. See what their needs are. See if you are feeling led to fill those needs. I would strongly discourage anybody from going somewhere and just trying to fit into whatever hole they have. Make sure it's something you're specifically feeling called to do.
Yeah, pretty important, because prayer is the plan for not only for our church, but also for other organizations and different ones around the world. And that's the best way for you to gain knowledge and wisdom and to know what God's calling you to do. And Laura's just the first of many. That's our prayer. And we actually have other people that have left Valley View to go around the world as well. But we're excited about the possibilities of what God could do in some of your lives. And maybe it's, as one couple has already left our church and moved on. They're actually in Seoul, South Korea. They dropped everything here in Dallas, left very prominent professions, and are working over there. But Laura's done something very specific with Pioneer Bible Translators, as she mentioned. And I know there were a lot of cultural differences when you got over there that you had to deal with. Can you share with us maybe some of the things hurdles maybe you had to overcome when it comes to differences?
So a daily hurdle that I still have is wearing a skirt. It's not my favorite thing. They're not very flexible because they're 100% cotton. And I have to get in and out of Land Cruisers all the time. So just a daily struggle is wearing a skirt. But other things, language barriers for sure. I'm not a gifted language learner, so having to converse in French for my job, for people that work at my house, for going to the store and getting groceries, for everything, it's something that is becoming less stressful over time, but has definitely been a part of that. And then you just have gender-based differences in different parts of the world. And I'm lucky enough to have great colleagues who, if I call one of them and say, hey, I need a man over here, they come and they'll, talk to whoever needs to be talked to. But those are just some of those things that, you don't think about before you get somewhere. And then you go, oh, yeah, that's really different.
Yeah, some things that you do have to overcome. But I love the fact that there's God's people around the world. And that more of God's people need to be more around the world. And not just here in our community, but even around the world. And I know this, that since you've made this decision, since you've listened to the call of God, since you've been obedient, there's been some victories that you've experienced, things that have just gone really well for you. Can you tell us maybe some of the things that have been exciting for you?
Yeah, so I think for me the standout would be getting to make friends, getting to build relationships with people, and then getting to hand them scripture and have them actually accept it and be excited to read it. I got to hand some of my friends that I'd made some calendars that have portions of scripture in them. And I told them, hey, these are in your language. And they're going, oh, sure. And so they start reading them thinking it's going to be French or English or something. And then they start sounding out the words and they go, oh my gosh, that's my language. And they hear it back from their own mouths and they're so excited about it. And that's been a huge highlight for me, just being able to give people something in their own language so they can have that more personal connection with God. On a personal note, I've learned how to do a totally new job. I've never done administration before, and getting to go somewhere and then kind of do on-the-job training. So that's been a victory, getting to feel comfortable in that role, learning to live by myself and how to manage a household there. It's a lot more work in some ways than here. So yeah, a lot of victories.
Yeah, God could do anything. I know that you faced challenges as well. Mm-hmm. Been some things that you had to overcome, but you've seen the faithfulness of God. Can you tell us how maybe you've been challenged the most in making this decision?
Yeah, so I think for me, the mental aspect of moving to a new place, experiencing a new culture, being away from my family, I think that's been the hardest. When you first get to the field, you're so excited, and you're just ready to work and ready to tackle anything. But then after a while, that does kind of taper off, and you start to go, okay, I live here now. There's different sicknesses, there's different people, there's different cultures, there's different ways of doing things. Can I really live here and be happy here? And one of the things that I was struggling with was just finding that balance. And it wasn't until I was, making friends and I was getting out and doing other things besides working and just being more active in the community that I realized that I had been struggling with that. And I was kind of coming out the other side of that.
Yeah, those challenges can be huge, but it's also opportunities for God to be faithful. Same thing for us, right? So she's just in a different part of the world. And so we're excited to be able to be a partner and to say, Laura's come from our church and is going around the world. And there's lots of things that we can be thankful for with what God is doing in her life. But I just know this, Lord, there's some very specific things that you want us to pray for. That's something that we can do, is we can pray for her. But what are some things that you would want us to pray for?
So for my next few months, I'm going to be in the States, and I'm getting to continue reconnecting with family and friends. And so just prayers for that time, for peace and for, restoration, because this is really a time for me to kind of recharge before going back to the field. So prayers for that time, that I can guard that well. Prayers for my teammates in the fields. The only reason I'm able to be here is because I have amazing colleagues who are willing to take on my workload while I'm gone. And some days it's a light workload, some days it's really not. So it's a lot of stress, and we all kind of rotate, so we all know how it feels. And I can empathize with, my lone coworker sitting in the office right now doing the job of 2 or 3 people. So please pray for my colleagues in West Africa as they do my job essentially right now for me. And third, if you could just pray for my support raising. That's part of what I want to accomplish while I'm here, raise additional funds for my time back overseas. And so if you could just pray for me and just pray for favor with people who are feeling led to give.
Yeah. For those of you that are maybe new to Valley View, maybe you don't have the history of Valley View. Valley View has always been involved in missions around the world and being very supportive of different organizations and individuals like Laura at different times. And we've supported Laura just a little bit. But it's something that when you give in the offering plate, I just want you to know you become her partner and other people's partners around the world. And so we're going to figure out how we can fully support her and work towards that in the future. But there's some things that we want you to think through as you pray for her. Maybe you could pray for, maybe you'll get to meet her out in the lobby after service and just say, hey, what are your needs? What are your needs? How can I pray? What financial needs do you have? And see if maybe you can meet some of those as well. I know that would be a big blessing to her. But if we could, just take a moment this morning and just pray for Laura and her work around the world. And as she's answered the call of God in her life, if we could just take a moment to do that, I'd appreciate it. Let's pray.